I'm giving it all I've got.
He's a one-trick pony. One trick is all that horse can do.
I'm giving it all I've got.
He does one trick only. It's the principal source of his revenue.
I'm giving it all I've got.
Hey guys, it's Simpson2142 here, and on today's topic we are going to be discussing the issue of one tricks, how everyone is pretty much on a consensual agreement that they are bad for the game and should be punished. More so, this has come into fashion now, with Blizzard recently issuing bans on certain one-trick players, quite famous ones and ones that are actually quite good because they're in Grandmaster and even top 500. Fui, who is a one-trick Torbjorn, and Stevo, who is a one-trick Symmetra. And so this is getting the question rolling now: should one-tricks be banned? Is it a fair and appropriately punishable thing? Now, my personal opinion is no. I don't think it's fair to ban one-trick players, and I'm going to give my reasonings for that. So before you instantly dislike the video and leave a very angry comment in the comment section, at least get to the end of the video, hear what I have to say, and then you can formulate your opinion after. So the first question I'm actually going to pose is, do we hate one-tricks as a whole? Or do we just hate the one-tricks that play certain heroes? And what I mean by that is, do we just hate the one-tricks that will play Torbjorn, Symmetra, even Bastion? Or do we hate the ones that even play heroes such as Mercy, Reinhardt, Winston? And despite what you may be thinking, I believe that the answer is no. We don't hate all one-tricks. If someone only one-tricks a Mercy, yeah, they'll get stick about being boosted and how it's an unskillful hero, but no one really goes out their way to report them and try and get them banned from the match. Reason being, Mercy is far more of a meta hero. She can fit in far more situations. It doesn't really matter what team comp you have or what team comp the enemy has, Mercy will always find a place of value. At the moment, her resurrect ability and Valkyrie and solid consistent healing is just too much of a strength that you don't really mind if you have a Mercy on your team. Torbjorn, as an example, in contrast to this, has a very niche playstyle to get maximum value from. In order to get maximum value, you're going to need a team to play around you. For example, I would say 50% of Torbjorn's value comes from the success of keeping his turret alive and either dishing damage into the enemy or just offering it as a distraction or crowd control mechanism. And so, to keep that turret alive, you're going to need to have a barrier tank such as a Reinhardt or an Orisa that can protect your turret and keep it up and fighting. Without that, turret gets easily destroyed by many characters, and Torbjorn has just lost a chunk of his value. And this is where the issue comes in. People don't like having to switch to play around a certain hero, because you have to commit the entire team to it. You need an Orisa, you need a Reinhardt, therefore you're playing a Deathball comp. You also need to pick DPS that aren't dive comp, so you can't have a Genji, you can't have a Tracer. You also need to pick healers that thrive in Deathball situations, such as a Moira or a Mercy. And yeah, there is the argument of it's not fair to make the entire team play around one character, but then there's also the flip side. Why should that character have to play on a different hero when they enjoy playing that certain hero? Especially when they're good at that certain hero. Now, if we had a one trick, let's say for a Widowmaker, who played nothing but Widowmaker, refused to switch, but they also had really poor stats to show it. So they were having like a 30% win rate. Their average damage and average kill count was significantly lower than what you'd expect a Widowmaker to be, yet they still played them and refused to switch. Yeah, you could argue that that is, a potential troll behavior, and they have essentially just threw the match. When you got players like Fui and Stevo that are up in Grandmasters and top 500s and generally get positive win rates with above average damage and kills, well, then they're not strictly throwing because they are good with that character and they can carry a match with that character. And Blizzard as well have been very controversial in their opinions towards this. They've always been telling us that Overwatch is an open game, that is no defined meta. People can play it their way. You can have a team of 6 DPS and still potentially win the game. That is the beauty of Overwatch. Now they've seemingly done a completely 180 on this statement and have started banning players because they're playing a certain hero that's upsetting the rest of the team. So Blizzard keeps telling us there is no meta, no heroes are ultimately better than other heroes, and Overwatch is always about developing new team compositions and new strategies. And that is one of the reasons why they won't implement a role queuing system, because that would suggest that there is a specific meta in the game that you should play to. But then at the same time they're like, oh, you're playing that hero. Yeah, they're shit and you should be banned, stop playing them, boof. And I personally think that's quite unfair. I mean, these players have paid money to play this game, and they are playing it within the rules. You know, they've picked a hero, because there are, over 20 different heroes in Overwatch. Each of them have extremely different mechanics and skill sets on how to play them. So when you do pick a Torbjorn, he is the only character in the game that will play like a Torbjorn. And so people may be drawn to that and really like the playstyle. They've practiced and practiced and actually gotten really good with that playstyle. And they've actually done well for themselves, hence why they're in Grandmaster and Top 500. So for Blizzard to suddenly just turn around and say, no, you're not allowed to play him anymore, get out of here, it kind of seems a bit harsh and unfair. And on paper, it's actually quite a good thing to have a one trick on your team, as they will know that hero, they will know their strengths, they will know their weaknesses, how to exploit certain positions on certain maps, and also they will have an awareness of who they are great to 1v1, who they can absolutely own in a fight, and who they will need to steer clear of. This example stretches over to people who flex onto Winston. It's a common misconception that Winston is actually a good counter to Tracer, when in actual fact he's not. He's a terrible counter. Yeah, he doesn't have to aim to hit her, but Tracer with her mobility can stay out of range of Winston and just absolutely pour damage into him and essentially get a free ultimate out of it. You know, unintentionally that player that's flexed to Winston out of the goodness of their heart because they're trying to, win ultimately, ironically causing more harm to their team as they're playing a character that they can't utilise, and they're just giving the enemy more free damage and more free ult charge. So it's not quite an easy answer as to flex players are better than one trick players. There are pros and cons to both. So what would be my solution to the one trick problem? On one hand you keep them, an entire team is forced to play around them. On one hand you get rid of them and you're unfairly treating a certain player base based on their preference of hero choice. Well, let's go back to what I stated at the start of this video as to why a Mercy one trick is not hated the same as a Torbjorn or Symmetra one trick, and that is that Mercy is far more flexible and she can be used in far more team compositions, and therefore is more meta based than a Torbjorn, who is extremely niche and needs to keep his turret alive with the aid of a barrier tank. Which, if he does have a barrier tank, Torbjorn can absolutely carry his team to victory. We've even seen it in the World Cup with South Korea when they used the Orisa barrier and the Torbjorn turret on the first point of Numbani, and they absolutely destroyed the offending team. So what I think needs to happen is, it's not so much that the players need to change their attitude. I think it's Blizzard needs to change the mechanics of these one-trick characters that people hate. And the best way to do that is to then make those one-trick characters like Torbjorn far more flexible in their playstyle, so they can work with more team comps and fight against more team comps. So Torbjorn, as a specific example, as I said before, he gets a lot of his value out of his turret, and whether his turret can stay alive, cause damage, and offer distraction to the enemy team. Well, what if we took that value away from Torbjorn's turret and put it into Torbjorn himself? I'm going to give an example here of TF2, or Team Fortress 2, which, as most of you are probably aware, is kind of what Overwatch based itself from. Now, Torbjorn himself is actually heavily influenced by the engineer character in Team Fortress 2. In the early days, the engineer character was very much like Torbjorn. He'd have to set up a little nest, he would build up a sentry to level 3, to which point the sentry would be ridiculously overpowered and could absolutely destroy anything that looked in its line of sight. If his sentry is destroyed, however, and he's not given the opportunity to rebuild a nest in another location, then he essentially becomes worthless to the team. So one of the patches that Valve put in for the engineer was giving him an alternate kit, and this was what was then dubbed as the Battle Engineer. What would happen is, instead of having the ability to construct a level 3 sentry, he would be given a mini sentry, which was essentially the same as a level 1 sentry. The difference was this could construct itself much faster, it was slightly smaller, so the hitbox was reduced, and it could also have a faster rate of fire. The engineer in turn would be given a health buff, so making him more tanky and sustainable on the battlefield. So rather than the engineer relying on his sentry gun to do the damage, the engineer himself would be out there on the battlefield getting damage, getting kills, and the mini sentry would simply stand as like a supporting fire. Now this is something I think could work really well with Torbjorn, if instead of giving him the ability to construct a level 2 turret, he only has a level 1 turret which can go up much quicker, aiding his mobility. It's a little bit tankier than a standard level 1 turret, but not quite as tanky as a level 2 turret, and it would have a slight increased range of fire. Torbjorn himself would also get a buff in terms of his armor. I think rather than starting with 200 health, he could just have a default 275 with his armor package, but not have the ability to stock armor on himself, only his fellow teammates. And that therefore would give Torbjorn's strength in himself and the people that are controlling him far more influence than having to rely on his turret. So if his turret gets destroyed, it's not a complete game over. And the fact that his turret does get destroyed, he is far easier able to construct a new one closer to the front line, therefore giving him more offensive capability as well, and also more mobility in defense. And I honestly think this is something Blizzard should look into. That way he has more value, regardless of whether he has a barrier to defend his turret, 'cause it's not as important anymore. And so he could play alongside dive teams, he could play alongside even tankless teams, and therefore people won't hate on him as much because his playstyle is far more flexible and can work in far more situations. So in conclusion, I think it's Blizzard that needs to have a look at the one trick situation, and rather than looking at it as though, oh, they're playing that certain hero, it's upsetting the team, therefore we should ban them to stop everyone getting upset, look a bit deeper and say, well, why are the team upset? It's because your one trick has a very limited playstyle, so take away those assets that make their playstyle limited and give them more flexibility and more equal strengths and weaknesses. That means they will be more viable, therefore less complaints. That way everyone's happy. The people that play Torbjorn are happy, the people that have to play with Torbjorn are happy. That to me is a better solution to the one trick problem. And please, if you disagree and think that's stupid, you can let me know in the comment section below. If you agree but think I've made some poor suggestions, leave that in the comment section below. If you're a one trick that suffers from this, if you've had trouble with one tricks, let me know. It's good to get information, it's good to get ideas discussing in the civil manner that we can. Anyway guys, that's about me for today. I hope you have a great afternoon, a great morning, a great evening, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.
One trick pony,
I'm keeping it all I've got.
one trick pony.